Jack Shabrowski. Let's talk innovation. As you can see by the background here on this first slide, when we think of innovation, we tend to think of things like, in this case, nuclear power stations. But the truth is that many innovations that have changed your lives are much simpler than that. Here I have KFC's original pressure cooker deep fryers. So these are deep fryers for cooking chicken, but KFC's secret is that they came up with a way of doing that under pressure. So they had pressure cookers that were deep fryers. And this, of course, is a picture of Harlan and somebody else who helped him invent this. And these are the original deep fat fryers that made KFC the successful brand that it is today. All right, so first let's talk a little bit about, we talked previously about the difference between innovation and creativity. Let's talk a little bit of difference between innovation and invention. An important distinction is made between invention and innovation. Invention is the first occurrence of an idea for a new product or process, while innovation is the first attempt to carry that into practice. That is, making it commercially viable. One critique and failing of the dot-com boom in the late 90s and early 2000s was that uh, much of the software developed may have been quite creatively inventive. Unfortunately, it wasn't balanced by sustainable business models by which the inventions could be made commercially viable. So therefore, there was a hiccup in the innovation, not necessarily in the inventing of the software, but in the implementation of it to make it commercial. Once again, let's go back to this notion that creativity is the novel step of being first and identifying something that might be possible. But innovation is the action of putting things into practical reality, despite challenges and resistance, rather than just contemplating. Both are necessary in business, but only one of them really translates into revenues and profits. And of course, that's innovation. And innovation makes a demonstrable, often disruptive difference in a product, service, or industry in a fundamentally new, tangible way that is a departure from the conventional approach. There are a number of different types of innovation. I'm going to talk about three of them here because they're all related to marketing and new product development. So first is business model innovation. That is internally focused. These configuration innovations analyze how an organization operates and creates revenues, and it shifts it. Some examples are Netflix, as they shifted from a DVD by mail company to a streaming subscription business. A second one, as an example, is Adobe, which transitioned from physical software licenses to cloud-based subscriptions for their products. So they had a continuous stream of revenue. And of course, the last one is one that we're all familiar with right now, Southwest Airlines, when they changed how they make money on travelers. As you recall, in the good old days of Southwest Airlines, um, 2 bags were free. There were no extra charges for seats or anything. The price you paid for the ticket was the price the flight cost. Now, of course, there are lots of add-on costs when you fly on Southwest Airlines, and so it's hard to tell what the price will be until you actually purchase the ticket. Um, New business models can be higher risks as they sometimes fundamentally change the way that the businesses are built and run. Business model innovations are best pursued when owners and operators identify oversaturated markets or low customer satisfaction or outdated technology. Second type of innovation that we're probably all familiar with is new product innovation or product innovation. It's nearly always tangible. Product innovations make existing material goods better in some way or are the creation of an entirely new product that supersedes previous models. Examples of product innovations that we're all sort of familiar with: um, smartphones, electric automobiles, wireless headphones, home solar panel businesses, and even something as simple as foot massaging insoles. So it's the most common form of innovation. Many times we think of it as being highly technical or somehow tied to all kinds of new technologies, but in some cases it is simply doing something a little bit differently. And a good example of this is KFC and their pressure cooker deep fryers for chicken. Another type of innovation is what we refer to as marketing innovations. Marketing innovations create new markets or increase existing market shares. Marketing innovations are new, positively disruptive ways for brands to talk and engage with their customers, but also to reach those customers. Examples are direct to consumer marketing, database marketing, and of course, social media marketing. Not only can marketing innovations introduce new ways of connecting with publics, but it can be as simple as promoting an existing product for different uses than it was originally intended. And of course, my example of this is the famous Post-its story from 3M, where the glue that they use for Post-its was originally designed to be a high adhesive glue, and it turned out that it was a very low adhesive reusable glue. Um, and so they couldn't figure out what to use it for originally, but then they came up with this idea of using it on pieces of paper to get the paper to stick without harming anything to a particular surface. Innovation. In business, it's important to be innovative rather than simply creative. We often confuse the two and we try to teach creativity in our classes when what business courses need to do is to teach innovativeness, that is, making products feasible and commercial. Innovation is not the same as creativity. Innovation does not require creativity. However, creativity can contribute to innovation. Many times innovation follows creativity, but it doesn't always have to. We also have something that's called goal-directed problem-solving innovation, and Don Treffinger talks about this in his book, Future Problem Solving, and that is, and he argues that it goes something like this: identify challenges in the future scene, select an underlying problem, produce potentially innovative solutions and ideas to solve the underlying problem. Generate and select criteria to evaluate the solutions, apply the criteria to solution ideas, and develop an action plan of which of these innovative solutions are we going to implement to solve those problems. So this, of course, is using innovation to help us be better problem solvers. There is something called innovation logic compared to conventional logic. And so I'm going to go through this quickly. The innovation logic is sort of a point of view or a way of looking at any industry or any sort of problem. The industry assumptions is that the industry conditions are a given. Value innovation logic doesn't assume that. It thinks that the industry's conditions could be shaped and changed. Strategic focus: a company should build strictly on competitive advantages. The strategic focus for value innovation logic is that competition is not the benchmark. Company should pursue quantum leaps in value to go back in and dominate the market. I have a good friend of mine who has worked in this area for a while. It's called leapfrog technologies. Customers. The conventional logic is a customer should retain and expand its customer base through segmentation, customization, focusing on differences in what customers value. The value innovation logic is that you target masses, to target the massive buyers and willingly let some of your existing customers go. It focuses on commonalities in creating customer value. And this is a little hard to understand and explain, but it is sort of this argument that that the customers you have may not be the ones that you will have in the future. Assets and capital and capabilities. A company should leverage its existing assets and capabilities. That is what we would refer to as their competitive advantages. The value innovation logic is a company can't be constrained by what they already have. That is, they need to look at new potential competitive advantages. Then in terms of product, services, and offerings, the conventional logic is the industry's traditional boundaries determine the products and services a company is going to be offering. The goal is to maximize the value of these offerings. Well, the value innovation logic would be an innovator thinks in terms of the total solution customers seek, even if it takes the company beyond the industry's traditional offerings and logic. And so what you get sometimes are companies getting into tangential businesses that aren't necessarily the one that they started off being in. A quick final note. There are lots of impediments to innovation. In many companies, it's not that they don't want to be innovative. It just turns out that there are barriers to allowing them to be innovative. First thing I like to point out is that most employees do not like change. That is, most employees prefer that things are working fine right now. I have a job, I have job security, I know how to do my job, I'm doing a good job at it. I don't want things to change. Those people are called Groundhog Dayers because of the famous movie Groundhog Day, where it's the same day over and over again. So these are employees that want things to just stay the same as it was yesterday and the day before that and the day before that, et cetera, et cetera. The other kind of employees that are impediments to innovation are yeah-buts. I get involved with yeah-buts all the time in consulting situations. You present some sort of an idea or a concept, and their response is, yeah, but yada, 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 yada. The yeah buts are people that you have to deal with in every business. Sometimes they're just ultra conservative, but no matter how you turn it, they are likely to be impediments to innovations. Other things that could create impediments to innovation: excessive corporate input. That is, if you have to go through corporate channels to make changes, and lots of corporate channels and levels, innovations are a lot less likely to be implemented. An unwillingness for the organization to change its focus. It doesn't want to be in anything but the business that's always been in. I worked for a company called Westclocks. And when I was at Westclocks, we were the world's largest producer of timepieces. Within 10 years of me being at Westclocks, they were out of business. And the reason is because they saw themselves in the time business, and it turned out that wasn't really where their focus should have been. And we'll talk about that at some later point in time. There's also the problem of a lack of interdisciplinary expertise. That is, we don't have the ability to break down the smokestacks and the artificial partitions that companies have, and therefore we don't create an interdisciplinary focus for our particular business. And then there's the problem of a lack of a big picture on the ultimate arbiter of innovation. That is, of course, customers and market adoption. Some food for thought.